And I was just in New Delhi and giving a teacher training course there for the Present and Future Teachers. It was one of the Raja Yoga cycles on Patanjali. And in one of the niyamas, santosh, contentment, I was looking in the Bhagavad Gita. There was a verse that I was interested in, and it was appropriate for the niyama of contentment. And I thought, since I already had one, that I'd use it this evening. This is from a very beautiful passage in Bhagavad Gita, perhaps the most famous passage of all, at the end of the 2nd chapter, when Arjuna asks to Krishna, what are the marks, the signs of a realized person? This, I don't know how to say it in Sanskrit, sthita prajna, that one. And Krishna responds, and I'd like to read just a short amount of his response and then speak about it. He says, O Arjuna, Partha, one who has put away all desires, being wholly contented in the self, may be considered settled in wisdom. He whose consciousness is unshaken by affliction and is not excited by good fortune, who no longer hungers for earthly affection and is without fear and anger. Such a man qualifies to be considered a Muni of steady discrimination. He who under all circumstances is without attachment and is neither elated by goodness nor depressed by evil, he is a man of established wisdom. So Krishna sets the bar, the standard, very high. If we want to be and become and recognize a truly realized person, what we discover is it is one who is absolutely centered and, as Master said, unshaken and unshakable in the midst of crashing worlds. As Swami would often tell us, quoting Master, be even-minded and cheerful. And this is what Krishna is saying. When we are not elated by good fortune, oh, a great thing happened to me, you know, Guruji gave me a parking place in front of the bank, or, you know, gave me whatever it is, or helped my son to get into the college that he wants. When we're not elated, emotional about that, but say, thank you, Lord, and stay centered. And when we are not depressed, when we are afflicted, or when we see evil or injustice, but remain in the self, then we are not only one of steady wisdom, but we are a person who is capable of responding to circumstances in life. And I'd like to speak about this a bit this evening, because the world is changing rapidly. But then, of course, it always does. I'm sure if I had been standing here 20 years ago, we could say the same thing. The world is changing rapidly, or 100 years ago, or 200 years ago. A friend of mine showed the movie Finding Happiness, which is now in Italian and 12 other languages. Showed it to her elderly mother, who is like 89 years old. And her mother liked it very well. And then they began to talk about all of the changes she has experienced in her life. I mean, things like, you know, television and travel by air, and now, you know, the internet and the global community and globalization and so on and so forth. I mean, in a long life, we see so many things and so much changes. And if we can flow with those changes, what we discover is that they are always for our good, opening us to new possibilities. I probably told you this little metaphor, which I read in a book of spiritual metaphors. And it's about this bird who had his home, his perch, in a tree. And the tree used to be alive. And it gave him sustenance, and he was very happy. But the area in which he lived, where that tree was, became a desert. And the tree slowly began to diminish, and it eventually died, but it was still standing. And there was nothing around it, and that bird just kept staying there on that tree. He said, "This is my home. You know, this is where I was born. This is what I know. This is my stability." And he wouldn't leave. But he wasn't doing well, and he wasn't getting much to eat, and so on. But he stayed there. And then one day, a terrible storm came to that desert. And it was so strong that it blew that tree down. It was no longer there. And he had nowhere to call his own. So he had to take flight. He hardly remembered how to fly. But as he flew, he gained strength. And he flew and flew, and it was a big desert, and he had to go so far. But at the other side of that desert, after flying 100 miles, he discovered a beautiful garden that had not just one tree, but hundreds of trees, and those trees were filled with fruit. And he was so happy that he had left behind his old dead tree and had to fly, was forced to fly. And then he discovered that garden. Well, the metaphor is clear, isn't it? The ego in us just wants to hold on to what we know, because it's what we know. Even if, perhaps, like that tree, it's no longer fully alive. There's another story, which is an experiment that's done in psychology departments. I read about this, and perhaps I've told you about it before. And it's with this little mouse, this poor little mouse. And he stays in a cage, and the psychologist makes sure that he's hungry. And when the door opens, the mouse runs out, and in front of him are three English word, 3 channels, what do trains go on? 3 tracks. And he runs down the first track, and there's nothing there for him to eat. And he comes back and goes in the second track, and he runs down and there's nothing there. And he comes back and goes in the third one, and at the end of the third one, there's a wonderful, delicious piece of cheese. And he takes it and sits down and eats it. He's very, very happy. And then he comes back and he's in the cage. And the next day, the psychologist opens the door again. So the purpose of the experiment is, how long does it take a mouse to learn where his satisfaction is? And I don't know how many days it required, but at a certain point in time, it could have been a few days or a week or a few weeks, the door opens and the mouse goes directly into the third track. He doesn't go in the first or the second, he goes in the third, because that's where he knows from his experience that that's where his satisfaction is. And so it goes on for many days. The door opens, he goes in the third track, he finds the cheese, he's happy. Now one day, the psychologist takes the cheese and puts it in the first track. So the door opens, the mouse goes out, and he runs down the third track, and there's nothing there. So he's disappointed. But what does he do? Does he sit down and cry and lament? Does he say that, it's unjust? The experimenter, should be fired? No. He comes back and he goes in the second track. There's nothing there, and he runs to the first, and he finds the cheese. He eats it and he's happy. The next day, when the door opens, where does the mouse go? What do you think?
Second track. First track.
Directly into the first track. Directly. if it were a human being in our lives, where would we go? In the third track. Because we're so accustomed to going where there once was fulfillment and satisfaction and a sense of stability, that even when it's not there anymore, we're still going in that direction. Because we want to hold on to the old patterns and the old habits. Now, there's no growth in this. There is no progress. You know, scientists who are holding on to old theories or techniques or ways of doing things, and somebody comes along, a new scientist, whether it's a Nikola Tesla or whoever it is, and says, we can do things in a different way, they're going to say, no, 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 it doesn't work. Swami always quotes somebody who says that a new scientific theory becomes accepted not because scientists are convinced that it's better, but because the old scientists die off and the new ones will accept it. You know, there's another metaphor in the Old Testament of the Bible. I don't know if you know this story. It's when I was just in Israel on a pilgrimage. We got at a pilgrimage there, so I'm kind of close to the Bible at the moment. So it's the story of Moses. You know Moses? Master said that Moses was a master. He was a God-realized master. So his people, the Jewish people, are enslaved in Egypt. And interesting, fascinating story, which I won't tell you about the whole thing. But anyway, he leads the people out of their bondage and goes into the desert, which would be the Sinai Desert. And there they want to go back to the promised land, which would be Israel or Palestine. And they wander in the desert for 40 years. 40 years. Now, it's a desert, but it's not a big desert. I mean, 40 years wandering in the Sinai. It's like, what were they doing there? Were they just going around in circles? But again, these stories are symbolic. Moses, and I won't tell you that story, and it's also symbolic, was not permitted to enter into the promised land for something that he had done. And he could stand on a mountain and look into it, but he could not go in. And nor could anyone enter the promised land who had been born in slavery. It was only the people who had been born after the Exodus who were permitted to enter into the promised land. This is so deeply symbolic. Because in order for us to get into higher consciousness, which is our promised land, all of our ideas and thoughts and experiences, which have been born from ego, from attachment, from desire. We see Krishna saying that we need to leave those behind if we're to become realized. All of that is born from the bondage of ego needs to die. And only our soul-born qualities and thoughts and whatever can enter into the promised land, the higher consciousness. Now, we as human beings, we get so habituated to certain things, to people, to places, to ideas, and so forth. And it's very difficult for us to flow with change. I'd like to tell you some stories from the life of Master, just a few little stories, and Swami, to bring the point of how important it is for us to flow with change. Because otherwise, we're going to be the mouse that keeps going in the third track, or the bird that keeps hanging on to the dead tree, and we're not going to get into the promised land. Master built at his Encinitas retreat a temple that he really loved And he called that temple the temple of all religions. And there are some photographs that survive from that temple. It was a beautiful temple. It was on the cliff looking over the Pacific Ocean, a very beautiful location. And in the temple, there were the symbols of all religions. And this is a movement that Master wanted to start. He said, we must establish temples of all religions everywhere so that people can come together and worship the one God who is our common Father. Well, because of erosion that they were not aware of, one day that temple slipped and fell down into the ocean. The whole thing, it was gone, just from one day to the next. And all of the devotees were just, they were so sad. How can this happen? How could we do this? And so forth. The Master stood there on the cliff and just, looked down at the temple that was by now in the ocean. And he said, from the ruins of this temple will come 3 others. And it did. After that time, there was the Hollywood Temple, the San Diego Temple, and I can't remember what else. And literally, they salvaged some things from the temple and created new temples. Not just 1, but 3 temples. So a master's a master, and he shows us the way. Because nothing is permanent in this life. God doesn't want us to become attached to anything. It's in the path. It's very touching, sorry. I think it's the last phrase in Swami's book, The Path, where he says, oh Master, he talks about his life and being with Master, and then he talks about establishing the Ananda communities. And he says at the end of the book, oh Lord, please don't let me be attached to anything, no matter how wonderful it is. Let me only be attached to you, and give me the strength to be able to leave behind anything, everything, because one day I will. During Ananda's development, we established different centers, first in the United States before we went to Europe. And one of those centers was in San Francisco, city of San Francisco. And it was a big, beautiful house. Amazing. Wow. It must have had 20 rooms in it or 30. Perfect for an ashram and for a community and to teach. And San Francisco is a good place. There's many people and so forth. And it's close enough to Ananda. It was ideal. And Swami sent Jyotish and Devi there to be the spiritual directors of that center. And they worked for years and taught and gave classes, established a business, established a little restaurant, did everything. And there were many devotees who were living there. And it went on and on for some years, but it became clear that it just wasn't happening there. No matter how beautiful the house was, no matter how perfect the city was, no matter how good the leaders were, it just wasn't happening. And so at a certain point, Swami and Jyotish and Devi said, we have to face reality. It's not happening here. So pulled back to the village, and very soon after that, there was some requests a little further south of San Francisco in Palo Alto. But there wasn't anything there. There wasn't a big house, there wasn't a big, beautiful ocean, but there were people who were asking and wanting to do something, to live together in a house. And so a very small center started, a very small house. And that house flourished. It became very soon too small, and then another house they got, and then another. And then he sent David and Asha there. First was Anand and Bharat, and then David and Asha. And they founded community, and it's one of the biggest Ananda centers. Now, everybody thought that our West Coast Center should be in San Francisco. You know, it's just it should be in San Francisco, everybody. But that wasn't the reality. It just wasn't the reality. We have our thoughts, we have our ideas, and then we look at the reality. Swami used to say, do what works. If it doesn't work, leave it, put your energy somewhere else. So until we pulled back from San Francisco, Palo Alto wasn't possible. And if you look today at the Palo Alto Center, I don't know if any of you have been there, but you've heard about it and you've met Asha. It is flourishing in all ways. There's a community, residential community there, beautiful place of about 120 people, a big church, there's a big business, there's a school that has about 60 students in it, and it's a very high level school, and they're building another one. I mean, it was just as though the floodgates were opened as soon as the energy was pulled back from what wasn't working. And then everything fell. So if we can flow with change and know that there is a divine plan for each one of us. There's a divine plan for our work, for Ananda's. Master knows what he's doing. Much more than we do. And I think that when he sees us getting attached, he helps us to move on. I remember at Ananda Village, when the fall came, September, and it was after the summer, and the summer was very busy for all of us. Excuse me. It was very busy for all of us because there were so many guests and everything. And then it's like, probably, no, it's not the same here, but school starts in September, and it's like the start of a new season. It seemed as though every year in September, Swami would, what we called, stir the pot. He'd just come and say, it might be good for, you've been doing this, but maybe you'd like to do that, and maybe you'd like to move here, and maybe you'd like to exchange houses. And he would just stir and stir and stir until everybody who had been more kind of stuck in something, suddenly they were doing something different. Maybe in a different place, in a different job, whatever it was. We called that the fall frenzies, because it's like everything was moving. And he just did it, and did it, and did it. We can't really fulfill our potential when we're holding on to things that, just when we're holding on to anything, really. We need to, when doors open or when doors close, what's our choices? If the door closes, we can go and bang and bang and bang on the door, and maybe we need to do that. That might be exactly what we need to do to show that we really have the energy and the determination for something, and we're not going to be stopped, by an obstacle. Or maybe it's the right thing to do to say, when a door closes, another one opens. And it's kind of like a cosmic law. It's like your children, or when we were children, you go to primary school, and then it's over and you have to go to, what do you call it, middle school? Secondary school. But do you remember that transition between primary and secondary? I do. It was not really pleasant because it was a different school physically, and some of the students were going to be going to other schools, and there were going to be other children. And it was kind of very unstable and even worse, going from secondary, what's next, high school?
High school.
Okay, going from secondary to high school. We went first to junior high and then stayed there for high school. It was extremely unsettling. But after a while, it was like, wow, look at all these wonderful activities and classes and new subjects, you know? And we didn't miss secondary school anymore because we had high school that was so much more exciting. Well, life is like this. Maybe we don't want to admit that we've been in primary school for a little too long, or secondary school, and God and the gurus keeps us moving. I'm going to finish, and excuse me for going a little over my time. I'm going to close with a personal story. I don't think I've told this to you. I don't tell it often. The first years that I was living in Ananda village, which were the first years of Ananda, even before there was a village. For reasons I don't entirely understand, I worked and served in the organic gardens. In fact, I was the person who studied with our expert gardener and managed the gardens. And I loved that work, totally. I mean, every day out in the sun, getting a nice tan, being healthy and strong, and driving tractors and being with plants. You know, the plants, they do complain that you have to, you know, but they don't argue with you like people. So I stayed in that job, and the fall frenzies came, and Swami was stirring the pot, and I would always hide because I didn't want to be stirred. Now, most people got stirred after about 2 years. That was kind of like the average time back then when a person would have the same job. I say back then because it was important that everybody learned many things. You know, it was not the time to specialize. But I liked what I was doing. So there were many stirrings of the pot, and I didn't want to be stirred. Well, after 8 years, and watching my friends, you know, going from job to job and growing and learning new things, you know, and being happy and progressing, I got to think, well, maybe I should be stirred. You know, maybe I should do something else. But I was really attached to what I was doing, and it was helpful. And I was also fearful of doing something that I might not like doing or that I didn't know how to do. But I thought, well, I'll go ask Swami. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. This is no condition to go and ask for advice because I'm closed. You know, it was clear to me, I like what I'm doing, I don't want to do anything else. Why should I bother Swami and take his precious time? If, you know, why go to a doctor if you're not willing to take some medicine? You know, save your money, stay home. So I stayed home. And what I did was I tried to get myself in the right spiritual condition to go to him. So in my meditation, I would, it's not the right word in Italian, I would imagine in my mind, I would actually visualize, I go to see Swami and he says, do this. Could I do that? No, I would say, you know, go to work in the market. No. So I would sit there and day after day in my meditation, I would just do it until, if he said that, I could do it. Okay, you know, nothing's forever and okay. Then I'd go to something else that I didn't want to do. I say, okay, so if Swami says to do this, to go work in the office, no, not the office. You know, no sunshine, telephones, all these people, no, can't. So I worked on that. So then the next one, so I go to Swami in my mind, and he says, Giovanna, I want you to go to Texas and help start a center. It's a desert there. No, I can't possibly leave Ananda village. I can't leave you, I can't leave my friends. I can't, you know, this is my life. I can't go to Texas. So I worked on Texas, took a little longer. Okay, so, you know, if it's God's will, I go to Texas, I'll go to Texas. Then I said, but what if Swami says to you, Shivani, you don't belong here anymore. Leave, now, today. Don't take anything. Don't talk to anybody. I mean, I really made it bad. And so I would sit there and just weep and weep. No, no. You know, so I can't do that. I can't do that. You know, so finally I got to the point where I could mentally, at least mentally, just walk. If this is what you say, this is what God wants, there's a reason, there's something for me out there, and I will do it. And I just saw myself walk and smile and be confident that that was okay. Then I asked for an appointment for Swami. I thought I was ready. So I went to Swami and I said, sir, you know, I've been working in the garden for these 8 years, and perhaps there's something that you would rather have me do. And Swami looked at me and he said, Shivani, you're doing such an important thing in the garden. I think you should stay there. So, a month later, telephone rings. Swami wants to see you. Go down to his house. Shivani, I've just been thinking, you know, we need a new manager of our publications business. How would you like to do that? And my mind just screamed, no, no. You know, and I opened my mouth to say no. And I said, certainly, sir, I'll do that. I will do that. I said, but I don't know anything about it. Oh, he said, that's not a problem. And I said, I have no experience at all in publishing. Oh, you'll learn. I said, well, what should I do? He said, sell my books. And I said, how should I do that, sir? He said, you'll figure that out. That was it. So for the next 4 years, that's what I did. He never gave me any other advice about how to sell his books. Sell my books, 3 words. So I would just meditate on the 3 words, and sometimes it was sell my books, sell. So that, okay, I understood that we're supposed to sell, but not print. So we closed the print shop, you know, because it just wasn't earning money and it wasn't needed. It was cheaper to get the books printed out. Okay. So sell my books, you know? Not books by other people. Right now, sell my books. Sell my books, you know, not puzzles, cookbooks, games, you know. So that was really all that was needed. Now, that was not my destiny, you know, to manage a publications house. But everything, you know, since then has been, what should I say, has been based on what I was able to learn, you know, by letting go, moving forward, doing something I didn't know how to do, learning to do it, and what's been the result? The most recent result is finding happiness. This is this is the European version. I'm just showing it to you. It has the film in English. It has the film completely in Italian, totally dubbed in Italian, and in 12 subtitles, and some special features, including a nice talk by Swami Asha on happiness. Now, the DVD in India has been released. It was shipped today. It should be arriving. It was shipped today, right? That's what she said. Yes. So maybe tomorrow, it will be here. And it's in English with subtitles in Hindi and in English, and there should be special features in that. So you see, I mean, from gardening for 8 years to finding happiness and everything in between. I mean, there's been a lot of changes and so forth. So flow with change. Flow with change. Because by doing so, those doors open and you will be so happy. You really will. People ask me, what does my name mean, Shivani? And I always give the same answer. I say it means renunciation. The ability to renounce things that are no longer useful. Just letting them go. So let me finish and I'll read again what we just read. He whose consciousness is unshaken by affliction and is not excited by good fortune. He who under all circumstances is without attachment and is neither elated by goodness nor depressed by evil. He is the person of established wisdom. So this is my wish for all of us, that we flow with God and flow with our lives and flow with what God has planned for us. Because God has only one will, one desire. Isn't that so? That all of us go back to Him. So let's each one of us, now and especially in the new year, take those next steps towards Him.